Spadea is an entrepreneur, media personality, father, a husband, and vocal advocate for working and middle class families. Spadea is the top morning drive talk show host in New Jersey at the big 50,000 watt 101.5 FM. Most recently, he ran for New Jersey governor in the GOP primary. He's done a little bit of everything over his 25 plus year career, serving as a political strategist, an analyst, a candidate for office, a business exec. He also regularly hosts music festivals and comedy shows in New York and New Jersey. We say good morning to you, Bill Spadea. Good to have you on.
Good morning, Ken. Great to see you.
You bet. And I mean, I feel a certain kinship to you, and I always have from the minute we first talked because of we have very common backgrounds in broadcasting, and
Yeah,
I know like few would how much of an effort you put in over the years and how hard it was that you worked to get where you are, and clearly the most successful talk show person in the state, bar none. And
thank
you
you.
reach hundreds
Thanks
of
for saying that.
thousands of people. Well, it is the truth, and I think New Jersey would be reticent if they did not thank you for running for office because you had to take a leave from broadcasting to do that. Let me ask you what that was like when you had to take that leave. Did you were you concerned that you would lose some
Well,
audience for coming back if you
yeah,
had to
I
come
mean,
back?
there were two concerns. One, you jump in with both feet. I was ready to go. I felt compelled. God opened some doors, and I was blessed with an opportunity that I could step away. But those were months without income, and you
Mm.
really take a hard look at it, and it becomes very clear why middle class folks don't often run for office because you've got to step away. Running for office, especially a statewide office, is a full time job. You've got to dig in. Now, I had an incredible opportunity to stay on the air until January. So I was actually able to stay on the air till about 5.5, 6 months before the election, and that was super helpful. And we had some guidelines, and we poked some fun at the disclaimers that I had to run. But I was able to stay on the air and communicate with the audience, and I just kept it in a separate lane of entertainment and news, and we kept the politics to the campaigning. But it was a big decision, Ken, and it came from 10 years of being on the air, just not only my 7 years as the host of Chasing News that aired on Fox Television in New York and Philly, but as the top morning host on 101.5 and listening to people. Then, over 10 years, you hear every single thing that is wrong in this state. And it got to a point where I was offering so many solutions. And then I looked at what the party was doing, and I thought, these guys are going to make the same mistake again, and someone ought to do something about it. So I felt compelled to run, and I did.
I'm so glad you did too. I was a strong supporter, and I think a lot of us in broadcasting were. And we see
Thanks.
in New Jersey the Republican Party kind of flounders. It thinks it wants to
Yeah.
be Democrat light. Then it starts to go a little conservative. Then it gets afraid, and it's all over the place. And I think that's part of the problem. Pick an identity, right? Pick a lane and stick with it. You have some advice, I know, for Jack Ciattarelli, because you really scoured the state. And there are a lot of parts of the state, 100,000 plus people who gave you strong support that you feel are maybe being left by the wayside.
Well, let's face it. I mean, the driving reason I ran, if there was a candidate who was announced and going to run that lined up with my principles and beliefs, the truth is I wouldn't have run. But when I saw that the default candidate was Jack Ciattarelli, who is now running for his third time, that was a motivator to say, I'm going to step in and do something. Now, I lost, and he's the nominee. So here's how I look at it. The most important thing at this stage, we are now 4 days in a wake up from the election. It is about the strategy and tactics that he employs over the next few days. And I've been giving him advice for about 2 weeks now. And the advice is really coming from, I've got an open talk show. You get to the front of the line when you disagree with me, and I love the conversation. But I've been hearing from a lot of politicos, insiders, folks that have raised a lot of money in this party, people who listen to the show, truck drivers, bus drivers, nurses, cops, teachers. And there are a few things that I think the Republicans and Ciattarelli are leaving on the table. Number one, how did he not pick up the phone and call John Bramnick and ask for his help? In these last few days and few weeks, he should have been knocking on doors in Legislative District 21, Union County, with John's support. Let's face it, Trump lost that district to Harris by 12 points.
Mhm.
Jack broke even in 21, but John Bramnick won the district by 8 points. John knows how to win the 21st district. And I'll tell you the truth, Ken, as we're having this conversation, it's not too late. Jack could pick up the phone and call John today and get out there this weekend. The second thing is he's got to walk back a very foolish statement that he made about immigration, saying that he now stands for a pathway to recognition. I don't know what that is. And there are a lot of legal immigrants that have called my show and talked to me and said, pathway to recognition, that's a fancy way of saying pathway to citizenship. And he's not differentiating between criminal aliens and folks that are undocumented that overstayed their visas. So he's got to walk that back, because there are areas like Middlesex County that are hugely competitive, but you've got a ton of legal immigrants that did it the right way. Last thing they want to hear is that somebody's going to cut the line. And how is it possible that it's a Republican allowing that to happen? So that's problematic for him. And then, there are simple things. I mean, Sheriff Gannon, by the way, I've been friends with Jim Gannon for a number of years. What a good guy. Solid pick by Jack. But the challenge is he's got to have Jim Gannon focused on Morris County. Chris Christie, when he ran for governor in 2009, won Morris County by 60%. In 2013, 70%. Right now, Jack is somewhere about even, if not a few points up. He's got to run up the score in Morris County. The key to that is Jim Gannon. And the last thing, and I don't know how you walk this back now, to be very candid, with 4 days and a wake up, but when Jack got some super bad advice getting involved in a Nick Sacco, Brian Stack feud in Hudson County. And you're looking at it with the early in-person voting. If you notice, Union City, Stack's hometown, running up the score, the number 2 Democratic vote turnout in just the first 4 or 5 days of early voting. So what I had advised them to do is pick up the phone and call Kevin O'Toole, call Al Bartless, who serves in the legislature with Stack, and say, guys, you gotta cool Stack's jets, because right now he is super motivated for turnout. And if you look at the numbers, with the early voting running about even, Republicans running a little bit percentage-wise ahead, but the numbers are overwhelming for the Democrats. And then vote by mail, overwhelming for the Democrats. Jack is looking at an election day with a deficit of somewhere around 230, potentially 240,000 votes at this stage before the weekend. So he's got to get into the weeds. This is now a ground game race, because we've got 4 days in a wake up, and a lot of the polls have this between 2 and 3 points. But to overcome that vote advantage of the Democrats, he's got to roll his sleeves up and shelve the ego and make some new friends.
Yeah, it's. I'm glad you even talked about the polls, because the last 2 polls show them a point apart. But again, it's always with Mikey Sherrill a point ahead. Granted, it's within the margin of error, but we keep seeing Mikey Sherrill a point ahead. Well, that was one thing when it was 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. But now, as you said, it's just a few days away to Election Day. And of course, early voting already in effect. So that 1 point now makes a difference. Because on election night, if it ends up with 1 point behind, that's it. Goodbye. I don't care if it's a half a point. That's the end of it.
Jack lost in 2021 by about 85,000 votes. There are 81,000 commuters that are taking that Northeast corridor. The Gateway Tunnel project is enormous. It has to happen, not just the 81,000 commuters, but the 95,000 construction jobs that are now hanging in the balance. It was a reckless move used as a political tool by President Trump. Jack's got to show that he's independent from President Trump when it comes to New Jersey. This is his opportunity. And I saw an interview he did just a couple of days ago, and he basically told the reporter, don't worry, things will work out. Well, don't worry, things will work out is not a plan to get construction jobs and commuters to get across the Hudson. What he needs is a solid plan, and it starts with telling President Trump, I'm putting my foot down. If we have to take the administration to court, we're going to do just that. And I think that way he can start to take that issue away from Mikey Sherrill. But time is running short. That window's closing. 4 days in a wake up.
Yeah. And honestly, you could see with President Trump that the whole Gateway Tunnel Project issue was a way of him to say screw you to his old friend Chuck Schumer. But in the
Yeah.
process, you're right. It's throwing out the baby with the bathwater. This is something that will impact the entire Northeast, could impact all of the train service and commercial transit from Maine all the way down to Florida because they all have to come through that. Bill
And
Spadea,
Ken, you and I
entrepreneur.
can talk
Go
about
ahead,
that.
Bill.
Okay. I was going to say, you and I can talk about that because, just as you said, we share a lot of experiences. And one of the things that we both do as broadcasters is you interact with people, you listen on the ground. I always tell my kids, we've got two ears and one mouth, use them in that proportion. And I think the challenge is so many people are turned off by politics because the politicians don't listen. And one of the reasons that more than 100,000 people voted for me, despite President Trump endorsing my opponent and telling people, I don't even know who that guy is after I interviewed him on the show. The reality is that they like the common sense, practical message. I'm a practical guy. And I have an expectation of political leaders. If you want my vote, you've got to be practical. You've got to be smart. You've got to be principled. And to me, this Gateway Tunnel project, when the president used it as a bludgeoning tool to Chuck Schumer, it eroded that confidence that the average working class person had in President Trump, at least in this part of the world, to say, you got to fight for me. That's, we put you in the office to fight for us. And it's not fair to the average person that is suffering. And, the fact that the Democrats won't reopen the government is patently absurd, that they're holding out on benefits to illegals is ridiculous. But that said, don't then crush 95,000 construction jobs to prove a political point. It's not the right thing to do. And Jack really needs to stand up to him on this. And, he'll find, I believe that if the more practical Jack gets, the less he gets into those talking points that are fed to him by his high priced consultants, the better he'll do among normal people. And there is still time.
Will we see a Bill Spadea running for an office in the future?
That's a great question, Ken. Let's just say I'm undecided on that. We'll see how it goes. I'm very happy to be back on the radio. I'll have some other announcements and media coming up soon. We'll be launching a new organization to get into the grassroots. And, I'm a believer that the Republican Party has to model what the Democratic Party did in 1993 when Christine Todd Whitman defeated incumbent Democrat Jim Florio. As disastrous as she was as governor, the Democrats looked at that. They used it as a pivot point and a building block, and they went after council seats, school board seats, commissioner seats, and they built a majority 8 years later that now for 25 years we've been stuck with. So my mission now, I don't know if I'll be a candidate, maybe, maybe not, but for one thing is sure, as long as I have a mic, the people of New Jersey will have a voice, and I am going to fight like hell for them every single day.
Well, we'll be listening to that mic, to that voice all the time. Bill Spadea, it's always good to talk to you, my friend. All the best, and thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you, Ken. Great to see you.